I think we could easily start. My name is Armin. I'm a product specialist for Knotch. My background is VJing, live events, and TV productions. Let's talk a little bit about technology changes over the last 30 years for the start. In 1986, computer industry is getting its footing. It is 4 years since first computer virus is born, and internet is 3 years old toddler. Computer-generated music and visual art is an abstract idea that has no ground yet. Fast forward to 2016, internet is a young adult, 27 years old. We all take it for granted and we use it for our daily tasks. Computer hardware is ever smaller and more powerful. Innovations now, new standards and expectations over the last 30 years surpasses any estimations done in the 80s. Advancements in its finest. Now let's take a look to our industry. Brilliant. Live event industry is definitely keeping up. So here's Queen in '86, IMAX screen on the top, and here's The Who in 2015. IMAX screen is on the floor level. So this is just one concert as a comparison, but I can definitely say that we can draw a line and say that stadium concerts for the last 30 years hasn't changed much. So there's always an IMAX screen on the left and right, and an LED screen in the center with some creative content. Why? Well, it's simple. Artists is the reason why people come to the concerts. They want to see them up close and personal. So, visual content, is that the primary reason why we all get together with friends and go to the concerts? Probably not. Neither is elaborate and intricate stage designs, even though us as an industry probably like them a lot. It is still the artist. So how do we surpass this? How do we wow our audiences and how do we move forward? Well, why not trying to merge the camera production with visuals to one coherent experience, getting rid of the distractions on the left and right and putting the focus to the center? That's exactly where magic is happening. So I'm just going to skip this one out. How do we get there? So these days, innovation started and driven by demands and offers in gaming industry pushed hardware and software advancements to the point where real-time motion graphics is leveling with offline rendering motion tools. So today we have a variety of real-time based motion graphics tools pushing the envelope and opening the doors for all sorts of interactivity and live control. So today we're going to talk about Knotch specifically. I split this presentation into 3 parts. First part will be creative use showcases, which can be found on our website if you want to check out the credits and a bit more of a write-up on it, so Knotch.1. Then we have 6 major interactive tools available in Knotch that I would strongly encourage you to try if you haven't yet. And then we're going to have a short but sweet hands-on section with Brett, who uses Knotch daily to create content for touring artists like U2, Bruno Mars, and many more that cannot be disclosed because of ever-present NDA agreement. Right, so let's get into it. Creative use cases. The first one that I wanted to point out to you guys is the Beatles session. Now, why is this interesting? It's interesting because it was a mix of pictures of the actual band and musicians playing live. So it's not a super advanced trick, it's just black and white filter on the band playing and on the pictures that are going through the walls. So imagine if they are showing newspaper with the cutaways of the articles about the band. It doesn't have to be the band there, it might as well be musicians playing on stage. All of a sudden, visual concept is coherent with the actual person on the stage. You don't need that extra information, you can just focus on the center. And the stage design that you come up with, it can be very, very various and different. There is no distractions. Nick and Simon, 10 years. This case is interesting because a gentleman who did this production decided that they're going to introduce a 3D scenery which will be static in some capacity. Now, what do I mean? This whole section right here is just a flat LED screen. So they've chosen a position that is optimal for the viewer in the center, and they just put the camera perspective from there. So by introducing the geometry, which was more or less static, by changing the lighting around it and elements in the back and foreground, they established this feel of some kind of a architectural piece being ever so present. So as soon as you trick your audience to thinking that this is permanent, you can start to play around with them. For instance, I'm certain that this IMAG effect just went from the ceiling down. That's great. So all of a sudden, there's little tools and little games that can be played with the audience. And I think we all strive to do exactly that. So this is a little visual representation on how it looks in a builder. Right, next one, Siguros. That's one of my favorites, and I have to admit, I notoriously stole the idea. I recreated it as a sample, so I think it's just great. So what they did, they had the bassist playing, there was a Kinect camera in front of him, and they took this 3D depth data and they put it in the 3D setting. All of a sudden, musician is the visuals. Do we really have to see the face all the time? Probably not, but if we can blend in and still keep that feel that the person is there, brilliant. We achieve our goals. So with that said, let's go for the available tools. I'm going to make this brilliant switch. And now we are in Knotch. So, as we've spoken before, there are several tools available and several workflows. So in this case, we're going to talk about 3D-based IMAX, created and rendered live in Knotch with exposed variables for show control. Before we go further, I think it's worth to point out that they focus attention to the stage, combine camera feeds with the content, and opens controllable values. So as we've spoken in the first sample, I mentioned a newspaper. So in this case, this is a setting of a comics book. If somebody is willing to wave a hand, you'll see that you're there. Greatness. So this is just one of the settings. Now, maybe your customer is not really befitting that kind of a profile. There's many other things that you can do, as long as you bring in the actual feed to the setting. Now, from there on, since it is being rendered live, you can open various controls. I was voting for this name for this event. I did not win the internal competition. Right, so you have various controls, OSC, MIDI, DMX via ArtNet, or even WebGUI, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. So in this case, I have a little MIDI controller rigged in just to prove that I told you so. So it's there. And again, there's many different scenarios that you can set up. It could be more classical. It could reveal camera production only on specific moments. For instance, there's you'll have to be a little bit more aggressive than that if you want to see yourself. So it might as well be that the verse is plain visuals and the chorus is based on camera production. You're not obliged to make a hard switch from visuals to camera. I think that's brilliant, and I think that's great. Now, another scenario. You're watching this and you're thinking, brilliant, Armin, this is great. I have a 2x2 or a small hippo. I'm not going to be able to run this on a small media server. Yes, you will not, but there are 3D-based IMAGs that can be rendered in offline rendering software and patched with IMAG via Knotch. And that's a rather interesting workflow, which I'm very keen to show you. It saves media server GPU and retains post-effect control if you choose so. Unfortunately, has less flexible controls. You cannot turn the thing on the click of a button if you choose so, because it's not 3D, it's just video in video. Right, let's switch through to the actual example. So what we see here is 3 instances of the video. So the first one is just the background. That background then is overlaid with a UV pass. And that UV pass is fed with the extra information. So this could easily be your camera production. Now, your system costs 2 IMAGs at a time, or 2 video feeds at a time. That's way cheaper than 3D setting. You can go really elaborate, really far out. The only thing is you don't have controls, let's say, of camera pivots. But if you're creative, and I rest assured saying that probably majority of you use timecode anyways. How many of you use timecode for your shows? There we go. That's what we're talking about. So this saves you the performance if that is of necessity. I think I have this very same setting in Cinema 4D, because that's exactly where I made this render. I'm going to quickly address what steps I took to get this running. So let's give Cinema a chance to load up. Now, I'm not going to go to the very specifics in this software because you probably use various different packages. I just want to point out the basic steps. So I had this scene. I animated the camera, just made a video, and as you see, there's this space here. So I gave this 3D object, the banner, or in fact the image, compositing tag, which is UVW, I think it's called in this software at least. Yeah, material UVW. So all of a sudden, I got the information of a normal that I can use. So it was just animating in and out. Brilliant. One thing to note though, and I cannot stress this enough, to take advantage of a UV pass in motion, you have to export it in EXR sequence. EXR is one and only, to my knowledge, format that supports float points. Float points are required to make sure that this video will fit, that there will be this 3D shift in Knotch. So when you have your EXR, when you have your background pass, you might as well do object buffer. Now, object buffer would be just a matte pass, which kind of cuts out, for instance, these trees. So we would actually see these trees in video. I'm certain you can relate to that. I'm just going to come back and point this out. So this is my matte pass. So basically it applies, and all of a sudden the IMAG looks like it's behind these wires. So when you have EXR, that's all great, and then you bring it to Knotch, and then you rig the system. As you see, there's 3 inputs being used, so video source, UV animation, and alpha pass. You try to play it back, and it's not rendering. It's like 5 FPS. It is, because EXRs are super heavy. So what you should do, you should take that EXR sequence and send it straight to the render queue. So as soon as you drop it to render queue, make sure to choose a specific codec created specifically for that task. So under the QuickTime GPU, under the codecs, there is one called UV animations. So if you render out that specific video in UV animations, you will be able to play it back much, much faster. Now there's one last step to be taken before this is applicable. I'm just going to turn on this pass now. This is how it's going to look when you're going to import it. So it's all a little bit wrong. And that is because we need one extra node in the sequence, and that's the decompress UV animation. There's like 10 nodes I'm sure of, nobody used, and that's probably one of those in that category. So I'm happy to see that maybe somebody will find this useful. Now, this workflow does not come perfect. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A. What if you have motion blur applied in your 3D pass? How do you solve it in Knotch? Our motion blur is all based on 3D objects moving in space. So I think some kind of a trickery might be needed. But since we're here, HiveMind, and I see a lot of faces that I met in trainings, I'm sure that you guys actually can teach me as much as I can teach you. Right, so this is a video in video for those instances where your media server capacity is not GX2, for instance. I'm going to move on to the next one. Face tracking, or better yet, face avoiding. So I think we all had the chance to play around with many of those in our mobile phones, and it's great to have little ears and glasses and whiskers, but that's maybe not necessarily what our artist is looking. I had instances where I showed IMAG design to a customer. It's like, Armin, brilliant, but keep the face clean. We need to see the artist. And then you're like, oh yeah, sure. How do I do that? So since we have face tracking, we can do that in Knotch. So I'm just going to read through. Allows face expression-based controls, because we have all range of controls that can be interacted or enabled via mouth open, eyes found, or the whole face found. So basically, there's a whole list of things that can be taken advantage of as an interactive point by just being a person on stage. I'm going to walk through some. Artist face is visible even in the most abstract design. I'm a big fan of distortions. I think that's the greatest thing in the world. And my customers not always agree with me, so that's a good way for us to find a compromise. And it allows the performer to interact with the visual design. All of a sudden, he can be driving some kind of a 3D panels around or some kind of a 2D element. There's many ways you can go creative with it. So I'm just going to open now a setting that is involving exactly that. So in this case, if the face is not found, computer is searching for it. I would probably refer to that screen. It's a little bit blown out. But if I was to come in, all of a sudden my eye is tracked, and I glitch when I open my mouth because I talk a lot. So this is one example. Let's take a look to the other, and let's talk then a little bit more practically. So this is the very thing I was speaking about when I said face avoiding better yet. So we can have a lot of crazy as long as we don't touch that artist. That's the reason why people are there. That's the reason we got paid. That's the reason we're on tour. Let's make sure that everybody sees that artist. So simple setup that I want to talk about, which I find very useful, is putting in the channel boolean together with glow. So first time you apply face tracker. So in this case, it's video source, face tracker. That face tracker then goes to say image 2D, and then you have another image 2D in the back, just so you would have a background. So I'm just going to change this face tracker from plus alpha to regular RGB. So this is exactly how it looks and how it works. So again, I would put a background of the same feed just so it's full. As you notice, not on this screen, but hopefully there is this little black outline. I find it super annoying. So a nice workaround there is using exactly that, channel boolean. So if you go from video loader to face tracker, and then from face tracker to you set two nulls, you pipe one null with two post effects, for instance, channel boolean, and I have to stress that it's important to wait while coffee machine finishes its cleaning. And then set the red, green, and blue sources to alpha. Alpha source should be set to 1. With that done, you can come back to your video now, to your face tracker, and change it from face mesh plus RGB to face original image with alpha mask. So once that's done, all of a sudden, if we apply, say, glow, we have more spread out things. It's flush, it's even. We can even expand it if it's needed. So it becomes more controllable. One important thing to note about Face Tracker, if you are interested to try it out and you haven't yet, it requires a shape predictor. So shape predictor can be found in a manual. In a lot of samples that people share, I do as well. That is a necessity. Just put it to your assets. Need be, even make it available offline, and just have it there. So when I was talking about expressions, one other node that probably doesn't get enough attention as it should is extractor modifier. As soon as I plug it into the face tracker, I have a whole great list that nobody can read because of the size of different controls that you can take advantage of. Left, right eye, mode up, open, close, face found, face not found. All of these then can be rigged to 3D objects, 2D settings to enable and disable things. Right, I think I'm going to stop about the face tracker for now here. I'm going to switch back to the slides. Next one in our list is text-based interactions from the stage to the screen. Now, how and why is this important and interesting? Opens new communication medium with the audience. All of a sudden, your artist can say hello, goodbye, and how are you, and make a spelling mistake just to prove that he's actually there typing. Maybe write the name of the city that he's in. Makes presets applicable to multiple artist performers. That's more of a business side thing. So if you run a club, if you are a traveling VJ who works with a variety of people, and you don't have a set artist that you travel with, make presets, just make that name an editable thing. Grabs real-time data from various sources. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, and this is a conversation of its own. And that's going to be held by Luke, one of our co-founders, straight after. It's the Hello Computer. So how do you get Knotch to talk with various things, from RSS feeds to Twitters? How do you grab, send, and work with the images? That's going to be a fun one. I'm going to stick around for that too. So let's take a look to a practical setting with this. I'm going to come back to the setting that we had before. Just going to have to make sure to find it. And that is this one. So here we have this beautiful sign saying Notchella. Wouldn't it have been nice if this event would have been called Notchella? We can actually change that. And that's exactly what I was addressing when I was talking about interchangeable names for, let's say, VJs who travel and have to work with different people. So We could do that via media server. If that is not available, one of my favorite tools is Web GUI. So if you go to Project, Settings, Enable Web GUI, all you have to do then is open the browser, call in localhost, define the port that is working, and you are able to change text. So I'm just going to conveniently wait while this shifts. And I'm going to wait again, because I missed my window of opportunity. And it says no signal, because the GoPro just turned itself off. But we have Knotch on the screen. So basically, you can either give this option to a performer on the stage, or you can keep that to yourself, make presets, sell yourself, make good stuff, and just reapply it. I think that's how we all work, no? We all have VJ loops and VJ packs. I'm relating to VJs, because again, it's my background, that's my passion. Right. So that's text. And again, Luke will be talking about this way more later on. Depth cameras. Brilliant tool to have a 3D artist in 3D space, as we've checked in the Siguros sample. It allows clipping out an undesired data. So for instance, if I am the performer and I'm standing here and this is the drum kit, I don't necessarily want to see it. So Kinect and RealSense allows you to clip back forward, and you can use transform image to clip left and right, need be. So you just define specific area of influence. Another thing, 3D space-based interactions. Now this is maybe more for the installs than performances, but you could easily have rigid bodies falling or particle system, and all of a sudden hands out just makes a collider. Let's take a look to the practical setting. Now, the fortunate ones of us who have a chance to work with performers and models probably would have a decent source of information. I, for one, did not have a chance to hire in some models, so I just freaked out in my kitchen. But I think it still works as a sample. This is direct copy of Siguros. So basically, it's a musician in a 3D stage, just doing his thing, and we can pan around, and we can look around. Now, this is not the perfect one for rapid and big camera motions, but you can easily build some kind of other design that perhaps allows it. And I'm sure many of you can even teach me some tricks and fun things about depth cameras. This is just a couple of ways that I find fun to use it. Let's move on. Neuron. These guys are our friends. They are disrupting the industry with their great products and great prices. They're working on Earth's gravitational pull. Their perception neuron motion capture suit. Again, it's a 3D artist in 3D space. You have a whole bone rig to dispose. Artists can become a stage extension. If you have robotics, all of a sudden those robotics can be controlled by hands. Opens 3D space-based interactions, triggers. So if you know exactly where your artist is and you recreate the virtual stage in accordance to the physical, you can even make a follow spot with that, if you choose so. Now, we have our friends. Actually, I see one of them here in the room. That's Daniel there. If you're interested, I'm certain they can give you a proper demo later on. And I know that they're coming out with many new tools and toys. So hopefully, those are going to be available for all of us mortals to try out and play with. So I'm going to make a very short demo on how does that work in Knotch. Here I have a setting with the mesh. It's actually, I didn't even have to rig it. I just went to mixamo.com and it rigs it for me. So when you get a model or you build your own model, make sure to take the main structural bone. So in this case, it's hips, connect it to perception neuron node, which we built specifically for them, fire up their software. In this case, it's going to be a proxy file. And type in the same IP. I'll have to do that again, I guess. So I'm going to go to the perception neuron. I'm going to turn it on. Go to settings. Grab that IP. And bring it back to Neuron. But I see it's already picked up. So basically, all you have to do is pick up the IP address and port number. To my best knowledge of what we've tested, it usually would have taken us 5 to 10 minutes to rig it up. Does it have its shortcomings? Yes, as everything real-time or interactive things based. Now, when I talk about shortcomings, I mean that it's working on a Earth's gravitational pull, so stage elements like metal trussing can be a bit hazardous. I don't want to speak on that too much. I think Daniel will make a better justice when you poke him on that. But I have never had an instance where this failed me. We used it on the LED floor. We used it on stage. I can vouch that it worked for me. And I surely hope that it's going to work for you too. But you have to be aware of the interference in the signal. Right. Moving on, I'm going to pass a mic to Brett, and I'm looking forward to see what he has for us. I am sure it's going to be worth noting, so I'm going to grab a pen and a piece of paper.
Hello, my name is Brett. I've done some concerts, a lot of IMAG work in the last couple of years with Knotch. That seems to be pretty popular nowadays. I'm just going to show you a couple tips that I've kind of found, like while working with IMAG, things that will probably help down the line and eventually sometimes even save your butt. Here's one right here. My first tip is have control of your input brightness. Oftentimes, if you're doing IMAG effects with particles or fields, you'll get, if you're panning your camera around, sometimes you'll go into a light, some things will flash, and all of a sudden, if you have a particle system, it's just going to make particles everywhere, and it's going to blow that up. So it's nice to have a little input brightness control when you expose your parameters. So usually I'll just get an envelope modifier and range remap that to say this is the image that's processing the particles. This is edge detect. And then if I connect this to the color correction on the brightness, then I can easily, when I expose this parameter, just bring this down or up or down or up, and that will adjust how many particles are generated. You can also kill the particle emitter if you want to, if it becomes an issue. But that's pretty handy, and that'll save you if things just get out of control on the big screen. All right, so that's my first tip. The second one is mess around with frame feedback. This is what frame feedback kind of does just by default. With that on, you can't really see a huge difference. But it kind of has a lot of nice uses that you can mess with. So if you've got a creative director that wants kind of a filmic look or something that's like a VHS, instead of having it set to just the typical blend 1000 max frame rate, you can turn this on, frame feedback, set to blend. Then you drop it down to 24 frame rate, and then put the previous frame feedback on 0.2. So that kind of gives it a nice like 24 frames a second look. It makes it a little bit more smooth. If you have like a 60 frames a second thing going in, you kind of just want to give it a nice look. Also, good old trails. It's always pretty fun to mess with. This one right here is just set to with the frame feedback with the blend mode on max. You can also do an add mode. Sometimes that gets out of control. But with the max blend mode, you can get copies of the artist pretty easily. Then if you can adjust the frame rate a bit if you want to make things look more stuttered. You can adjust how long the trail is here. And so on. Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with frame feedback. Also, probably an underused thing in Knotch is blend modes and post effects. I've found these really useful. Just different ways to get weird with a traditional tint, for instance. Set to multiply, this is kind of the standard that you would get with this multiply. It might look a little different on this screen. But so this is just the multiply blend mode, but if we use this one instead, which has the minimum blend mode, you get a lot more. I can't tell if you can tell on these screens, but it kind of makes a bigger difference in the colors. You can get some pretty cool looks just by adjusting these blend modes and having some fun with that. A bigger way to tell is, here's a traditional glow. This is kind of glowing the whites as you would imagine. But if we set, instead of having that additive blend mode, let's use this one over here that has subtractive, because then you get more like a solarized effect. So if you kind of go through these post effects and just start messing with different blend modes, you can probably get some kind of weird results. Sometimes happy mistakes, happy accidents. Same with this max mirror. Instead of having it automatically just cut the mirror off right in the center and having your artist walk to one side and he disappears completely, you can set it to max, and then he'll still be on the screen, but then he'll have a mirrored image on the opposite side. Cool. Here's one of my favorite techniques, creating dynamic overlays from stills. You can do overlays with movies if you just want to bring movie file in. I like to do it with stills, though, because you can see I've got in this setup here, if we go down to this section, all this is 5 different stills. If I pause this, you can see just the basics for this. There are 5 different scratch textures. But what I did is I duplicated those 4 different times and then transformed them so they're all kind of different positions, different scales. And then what you can do is connect all those to a multiplex source right here. So it just combines them all to the same node. And then we've got a math modifier that's set to random noise with a scale of, is it 19? That goes through all of these different images. So it's just scrolling randomly through all 20 or so with the quantize modifier. So then it's just kind of constantly creating a different overlay. Had you done this with a video loop, of course, you'd eventually be like, oh, okay, it's set to time. You see that one spot right in the middle each time on a typical rate. So this, that kind of avoids that, kind of gives you more variance just from 5 stills. Cool. And one more tip. Actually, I think I've got 2. Make your own overlays. This is has been a lot of fun too. Just different ways to introduce color, like ways to introduce like kind of variation to just a typical thing here. Somehow I lost it. Uh-oh. What did I do? There we go. So what this right here is just a fractal noise with a bunch of post effects on it. If I preview to viewport, is it going to give me trouble? There you go. It's got a different aspect ratio because it's from a show. But you can see this is just a fractal noise with the math modifier with random noise that's just changing the scale of the fractal noise. And then with just a bunch of post effects on it. It's all being generated in real time in Knotch. And we've got some RGB distortion, pixel sorting, pixelate. Just fun ways to give it a nice texture. Then you just overlay that as a separate channel. That's a separate image 2D. Then you can control that from your board with an exposed parameter. Cool, so that's most of my Knotch examples I have for you. I saved the best for last. My favorite, Spreadsheets. Definitely the sexiest thing I could talk about right at the end of the talk, but this has saved me a ton. Like, this was from the U2 Experience and Innocence tour that we recently did, and it comes in handy so often if I can figure out how to zoom in here. What I usually do is, for each look we have, sometimes the creative director will be like, hey, we want this look, we want this look, we want this look, and they'll all be different. You don't know what song they're going to use it for. You don't know what exactly is going to happen to it eventually. But so if you just kind of start numbering your block names and your look names, and then whatever work you do, just kind of keep it in a tracker like this. I usually have the project name, each of the exposed parameters, I'll list it out and kind of description of what they do, and then a minimum and maximum range that I gave the media server. And then also the default. It's nice to have a default that you can save and tell everyone, okay, if you want to achieve this look, this is the number that you need to put into your media server to make that happen. Otherwise, you can sometimes load a block and it's like, this looks like crap. It doesn't look anything like you showed me. You'd be like, just put these numbers in and you'll be good to go. I also put in, like, we were on a GX2. I put the estimated milliseconds on there. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for my section. Yeah, spreadsheets.
1, 2, 1, 2. Is this on? This is on. So we are happy to take questions about any workflow you've seen or any stuff that you have about spreadsheets. Yeah.
Spreadsheet question.
Oh yeah.
Go.
I got a mic here. Hey.
Is there an export node block like the min max default?
Oh.
You have to manually put all of this
That would be pretty cool. I haven't seen anything where you can automatically like say this is what all the settings are at and like export as a CSV or something. I'm not aware of that. That'd be really cool though. So I'll talk to Luke and everyone.
So yeah, if you're using an envelope modifier to do your master control, why then would you need to put the minimum and the maximum ranges if that's the way to move?
It's just for reference for them. Usually it's for 0 to 100, like, or at least on the show 0 to 100. Sometimes it's been 0 to 255. But I just keep that in. Oh yeah, you can see here we got 0 to 255 because that's the RGB values. Just it's easier for them to exactly dial it in. But for some other things, it's easier for their preference. Sometimes it's been 0 to 1, sometimes 0 to 100 based on what the effect is. So that's usually why I use the envelope modifier.
Looking at creating good system control, it all seems to be with envelope modifiers, which is your main control. You do that 0 to 1, and then obviously that will affect your range according to how you set it.
Yeah. Usually I use an envelope modifier connected to a range remap. So that way, because not every effect is going to be 0 to 100 perfectly. So you could say your glow is set to 0 to 0.5 on your range remap, and then but 0 to 100 controls that. But sometimes you want 50 on your media server to be 0 for the glow, if that makes sense. So it gets tricky sometimes, but it's based on what look you want.
I have a question in regards to the Microsoft Connect. When you do the 3D clipping, I've been using it recently and found that it's quite pixelated and noisy on the outside. How did you combat that in your video?
Well, I usually use I usually use post effects to fix that. So I cannot specify exactly what would be good, but I would say maybe applying blur if you have pixelation. The other thing, I usually treat that information just as a base for something. So I pipe the mesh to some kind of a system. So let's say if you pipe it to particles, even if it's pixelated, it doesn't matter because you can just take out the visibility completely. It's only particles, or only fields, or only procedurals. So I do agree, the raw signal is very pixelated, but is that necessarily exactly what you want to output? I would offer to pipe it to some kind of a system that we have and try to achieve smooth look. So as we talk now, I would just probably start up with procedurals because you can set it to blobs. It would smooth out things. Did I answer the question? Yes.
If the face tracking has the constant delay or it's dynamic, depends on the node of the machine?
I think it gets better with the better machine or the machine that is not overloaded like mine in this case. That's something you should test out. It, of course, will have a bit of delay. That can be altered by downsampling. So default downsampling is set to 2. So the smaller the image, the faster it goes. So there are optimization tricks depending on your show and your needs.
Okay, but I'm interested in to sync the video delay this video also for 2 or 3 frames to resync them.
I guess then it would be trial and error and setting it up with modifiers, basically finding the correct ratio. Again, it depends on your machine in many respects.
Yeah,
It's such a float, like it.
Like in the JavaScript, there is always 1 frame behind because the last thing that the render do in the frame. Yeah. So the question is that in this situation, it depends on the which is the place in the frame render. It's at the beginning, on the end, or it's a good take to try the position 2 frames.
As soon as you mention Java, I have to admit I am able to change the font color in my website, so I know basics of CSS, and that kind of ends there. But if you wouldn't mind coming here afterwards, we can find a developer and get hands on this and answer this properly. Fortunately, I cannot offer an in-depth answer to this question. So, 1-0. Yes?
The extraction mode is only working with face tracking or is it also working with some other modes?
If face tracker works with other objects apart of... Extractor works with anything. For instance, if you have a 3D mesh and you want to use it in some creative way and that creative way is not enabled by just opening the options, pipe it to the extractor. Extractor is your best friend. It can be used to anything from post effect to 3D object, you name it.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of fun. Like if you go into a lot of modifiers, work specifically with extractor, like the video sampler, like if you're testing for brightness and whatnot, that you need to connect some kind of extractor to it usually. But yeah, you can get a lot of useful data out of that.
So, is there any other questions that we would have? Are you already bored to the oblivion? Then we'll leave you be. Thank you very much for coming. I hope.
Oh, one more. Right before the clap.
Almost.
Any tips for handling with complex projects? Like when you have multiple nodes?
Multiple what?
When you have to, like, you study yourself, spaghetti.
Yeah, spaghetti.
Grouping, I would say it's a good start.
Yeah, grouping is good in order to kind of consolidate things into small sections. I actually talked to Josh about this earlier too. It'd be cool to see, we all kind of have our different ways of setting up a scene. Like usually I've got the same thing where I've got all my envelope modifiers, all exposed parameters on the left side, all the particle systems up on the right, all the image 2Ds stacked up right next to the root and all that kind of stuff. But that's a good way to kind of manage a giant mess of spaghetti. But yeah, it's really up to your
That
preference.
opens a good option for a conversation about industry standard aesthetic approach to node graph. I don't think it's going to ever happen that we all use the same layout, but if you use it with your colleagues in a company, probably it's smart to come up with a system where you have specific things in specific areas. Another thing, you can leave notes for referrals. That helps. So grouping, putting notes, and being smart about how you rig things. So if you're using 3 shape 3Ds,